Sounds good, and it's my pleasure. Welcome to folks who are here. As mentioned, it's kind of nice. It's a little smaller group, so we can have a little conversation later if you have questions. I will go ahead and share my screen so you can see what I'm here to share with you today. Just give me 1 second. Very good. So you'll see I have a slightly different title on my slides, and as versus what the talk was advertised as. And that's part and parcel of, I just put in a huge proposal for a big project in Pennsylvania, huge for me anyways, and was working with a media literacy expert. And we both kind of came to a similar conclusion, which was that everybody, and I just got out of a conference in the public relations field. And, what we are now in communications doing is trying to avoid trigger words where we can. So, so the vernacular, in a sense, in this space has shifted a little bit to reference how information writ large is being manipulated, which is basically a similar way of saying disinformation is just a little bit more current. So, and the important part of this presentation as well, as I was sharing with Lynn, is, well, what can we all do? So I'm going to share all about these dynamics and so on, and then what? That's what everybody wants to know. So want to make sure we can get there. All right, well, a little bit about the organization first. Our mission at Truth in Common, we are a nonpartisan nonprofit, is to help people and organizations become savvier consumers of information, really navigate digital spaces better, because I don't believe that any of us were born knowing how to do that. Everything is changing so quickly. And in the process, disrupt the spread and the influence of falsehoods in our spaces, and hopefully and ideally take a stand for truth and democracy, fact-based content as well. This is just our little strategy graphic on the right, but you can see this image on the left is from Perry Hall Library, Baltimore County. That was our biggest project was in Baltimore County last year, where we did three-part workshop series in 3 different public library branches in Baltimore County: Perry Hall, Woodlawn, and Cockeysville. And the experiences sort of grew in popularity as time went on until over 50 people were registered in Cockeysville. This is the first one in Perry Hall. And, people come back, for example, Tuesday. So they come back 3 weeks in a row, and we talk about these dynamics. We talk about the local media ecosystems in their area, and then give a lot of examples of mis and disinformation. And then we get into civil discourse, because a lot of people are really quite interested in or upset about the fact that it's difficult to even talk to our neighbors these days. So we get into some conversational tips, and you'll see that as we move our way along. This is sort of a busy slide to show the number of guest reporters, several of the guest reporters that we had come last year. Everybody from NewsGuard, which is a fact-checking outlet that's incredible. If you ever want to follow an outlet that is doing excellent work on researching disinformation campaigns and kind of correcting the record on many things, NewsGuard's a great follow. All the way through to lower right here is the NBC, the noon anchor at the NBC affiliate in Baltimore. Lower left here is Lauren Weber, accountability reporter from the Washington Post. This is the NPR affiliate, Emily Hofstetter, speaking in Baltimore City. This is our local, this is Teresa Frontato of the 51st, our newest outlet in Washington, D.C. So just to give you a sense of what we do, the library workshops are a big part of it. The other piece is professional development with people that are sort of on the front lines of mis and disinformation. For example, public health workers. And in fact, right, so if someone comes in, you're a public health practitioner, and someone comes in with vaccine hesitancy, yet you need to provide health services, what do you do in that moment? That can be quite challenging for professionals, because it's sort of a new dynamic, and it can also be quite stressful. So we work with professionals to help them with those moments as well. Oh, I wish, I think one of the ways that I got on the radar screen of you all at the Georgetown Village was because I had done a class at American University's OLLI program, Osher Lifelong Learning Institute. And I'll just let you know that I've put in to do a smaller course this summer. And I'm going to put in for the long course again in the fall. And I'm pretty sure it'll be accepted. There was a lot of interest last time. So if anyone's a member of OLLI here, you can take a little bit longer course of mine this summer and hopefully in the fall as well. Just letting you know. Okay, so I'm going to start out talking a little bit about our information ecosystem now. As mentioned, my background is in strategic communications. I worked for a firm for many years, really working with nonprofits and government agency. I was a federal contractor for many years. So a lot of the changes we're confronting in our society now are hitting fairly close to home, as they are with, I'm sure, with many of you. But that's my background. So I approach these dynamics from the role of having managed and developed communications campaigns for my entire career. So I think the key thing to know about our communications ecosystem right now is it's much more direct to consumer than we've ever experienced before. So whereas before we as PR people might have pitched our leaders to speak to the media and then the article comes out, you can see that media gatekeeper there. Now, much of the communication is happening directly from the spokesperson to the public via social media channels for the most part. If you think about President Trump, for example, joined Twitter in 2009 and really leveraged this idea of talking directly to the people and did that incredibly effectively to the point where Twitter grew, his following grew. Now Twitter's been taken over by Musk. It's rebranded, but that direct to consumer dynamic is happening. And it's not just, of course, on Twitter. Before I get into my sort of big graphic about social media, I wanted to share this framework that we communications people use to help kind of sort through the communications landscape. We use this in our professional lives, but I actually have started using it with just sort of lay people that aren't necessarily professional communicators because it's kind of helps us sort it out. So we talk about paid content as advertising, as being in one quadrant, right? You might do page search campaigns or advertisements, either online or on TV, wherever. Earned media is when we work with journalists to tell stories, where we position our spokespeople, we write articles ourselves or have our spokespeople write articles, we write our op-eds, that kind of thing. Owned media is our websites that we own as an organization, for example, that we run, and we can put any content on there that we want, or perhaps our blogs or our newsletters that we call owned media. And then shared or social media is social media, all these platforms that allow us to, again, speak directly to our audiences. And here is sort of a back of the envelope, because there is no perfection here, but this shows a lot of the different social channels. Really, it's fairly comprehensive, but not entirely, and how they grew up over time. So this comprises a lot of the social channels that you may have heard of, and perhaps some that you've never heard of. And that's in part the point. So, for example, did you know that after President Trump was banned from Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram post the 2021 election, one of his aides started this other platform called Getter. The next year after that, Truth Social was launched. We know Trump now has his own media properties. Rumble is a video sharing platform that was started back in 2012 to 2014 that also runs sort of as the host for Truth Social. So there's a lot of intermixing among these platforms as well. And really the point of this slide is so many of these platforms, a lot of people have never engaged with at all, may not even be familiar with, yet they all are carrying traffic, this direct to consumer messaging all day long, every single minute. So the yellow boxes are sort of what we can almost call legacy social media platforms, some of the early platforms that grew up mostly in the meta universe, right? Facebook, Twitter, YouTube was founded in the same kind of time frame, 2004 to 2007, as Facebook was. Twitter was launched at that time. Instagram launched a little bit later. This is the symbol for Reddit, this red guy here. You may have heard of Reddit, and so on and so forth. So I share this just to say there's a lot going on in the social media realm. And a lot of it is sort of beyond what you and I may engage with, right? The average person may have two or three, one, two or three platforms, right? You folks may be on Facebook. You may use that commonly. Maybe you're on Instagram to see pictures from your grandkids or whatever it is. But just know there's this really a much broader universe out there. The most recent launch was Blue Sky, which is now sort of stepped in, taken over some of the followers that felt they needed to defect from X for various reasons. So some people you may have heard of are on Blue Sky now. Even though I work in this world, I'm not quite there yet because I was sort of waiting. I thought that Threads, which is another, where's Threads on here? Did I forget to put it on here? Oh, here's Threads. I thought Threads was going to sort of step in for Twitter or X, but Blue Sky is kind of gaining popularity now, et cetera. So it's an ever-changing landscape, and it's just important to understand that it allows for this direct-to-consumer communication. So I like to, sometimes in my mind, I compare it to, if you think about FDR's fireside chats way back when he talked directly to the American public through the radio. And here's a little family listening to FDR's radio addresses for those years. Look, and he kept that going. I forgot about this for a good 11 years. So then if you think about it today, it's not all that different. Again, we're speaking directly from spokesperson to public. This is a graphic that I've pulled that's back from 2017, but some reporters at the Washington Post did a scan for Twitter posts specifically about Obamacare. So you don't have to read all these messages. I will just share with you that they all are in some way discrediting Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act by saying this vernacular, that it's dead. Obamacare won't be around for a year or two. Obamacare is dead. Obamacare is a disaster. It's failing. It will fail. So if you think about it, like if you're a spokesperson trying to get that message across, you might write 4 different op-eds over the span of 5 years. That's kind of a reasonable trajectory. Or you can flood Twitter with the same message basically over a series of days. And now it could be over a series, especially with AI, a series of minutes. So think about how impactful this message is if you're open to thinking negatively about Obamacare and you're seeing this message over and over and over on the same feeds. So you get the idea, but here's a few quotes. One from someone at Harvard Kennedy School saying communications are the key to power now, rather than just brute strength. So much of it is the communications landscape and kind of who owns it. And then Chris Hayes recently published a book called Siren. Oh, I'll look it up in a minute. I always forget the second name of the title, but if you Googled Chris Hayes and Siren, or you looked at this podcast on every Ezra Klein's podcast, you heard him talking about the book. The main message is that it's all about basically commanding people's attention now. It kind of doesn't matter how, which is why you see so much, messages that sort of back years ago would never have been acceptable to share, would never have been promoted because they were sort of not socially acceptable. Now you see all manner of stuff, true, false, disparaging, prurient, all sorts of different kinds of emotions sparked by these messages. But the idea is that people want to command attention, and the social media ecosystem is what has grown up that dynamic. So when you see people just saying the wackiest things, the idea is to command our attention, and the wackier the thing that's said, the more it will tie up either social media and go viral, or then get translated into mainstream media where reporters write about it. Can you believe they said this? So it used to be that, you've heard the term all PR or all press. Any press is good press. It used to be that we only wanted good press. Now we'll take kind of whatever attention we can get, and it kind of doesn't matter what kind of content that is. So check out Chris Hayes's book. So what's going on with mainstream media right now? We have a news avoidance problem. So there's sort of an overwhelm dynamic with things happening so quickly at the federal scale, for example. And then you've got some people that are finding that they're avoiding traditional news. Maybe they've sort of bought into this vernacular that either news is failing or news is dying, that the New York Times is failing, whatever your outlet of choice. the disparagement of mainstream media over time by messages from powerful people have had quite an effect. So that plus overwhelm can help people maybe just shut down the news altogether. Sometimes that slides into straight up cynical views where people just repeat these negative perceptions about mainstream media. Well, I might push back on that because fact-based reporting is really what we have to connect us to what's going on, as well as help us discern what's true and what's false. Another dynamic that's important to understand is the blurring between opinion and fact-based reporting. So if you think about primetime cable news, whether it's you're listening to Fox or MSNBC or CNN or whatever, there's going to be more and more opinion journalism in there, more and more talking heads as the night goes on, and some outlets more than others. Then if you think about a dynamic like journalists leaving their outlets and going over to Substack, well, some of them have built their own like sort of little media empires or media outlets that are their own reporting. Sometimes they have a team. But what you might see in that reporting is because there's not the infrastructure for fact checking and research, et cetera, or it's just a different purpose that the journalist has chosen to use the Substack for, you may see more opinion-based reporting, and it's not just straight up fact-based reporting if you follow certain Substacks. It depends, but it's just a dynamic to be aware of versus if you pick up the Washington Post or PBS, you watch PBS NewsHour, you read the Associated Press, generally speaking, it's fact-based reporting where they try to mitigate bias as much as possible. We have a news desert problem. You've probably heard of that. This is the Medill Local News Initiative's map that shows the little yellow counties are those with 0 local media outlets serving the community. The light blue counties are where there's just one. So you can see how many counties in the United States have either 1 or 0 media outlets serving them. And that's a problem because who's paying attention to what's going on in the city council or the school board? Who's paying attention to the state house? Who is holding power to account? The traditional role of mainstream media, if there's nobody working to serve your community. So that's a problem. And there's hedge fund buyouts and all sorts of other dynamics going on. And then we have sort of noted partisan attacks against mainstream media. And even this graphic is even a cyber attack where Lee Enterprise news conglomerate based in Iowa that owns papers like the Buffalo News, which is my hometown paper, somebody issued a cyber attack kind of attacking that whole news network. So, but honestly, the ones to really pay attention to are partisan attacks, hyper partisan attacks that are trying to discredit mainstream media and you could kind of say that the goal is to keep people less informed than they are today. Some of the reporting that triggers my emotions, and we'll talk about that, is when I see attacks against NPR and PBS, because if you think about these maps back here, for many communities, your local NPR affiliate is sometimes all you have. And maybe that NPR affiliate is covering, like, for example, a partner of mine in Pennsylvania covering 9 different counties with a staff of 5. So we need that reporting, and they're nonprofits, so they don't have a corporate agenda to bear. So I'm a big supporter of nonprofit news, and these are just dynamics we should be aware of. We'll talk a little bit more about how to, in a sense, counter that a little bit. Another concept that's kind of important to understand is now, again, also with sort of the advent of social media, people are able to kind of leverage concepts and terms that are poorly understood for their own partisan or agenda gain. So take, for example, this article that I'm showing here is from my own newsletter, The Propaganda Trip That Sparked a Movement. And what I'm talking about here is critical race theory. If you think about when that kind of hit the mainstream agenda and people started talking about it, nobody knew, and few still know, what that really is. That it's an academic theory that is basically taught in law school, that was originated by lawyers, that discusses systemic racism. But through a sort of a propaganda, oh, that's my dog. It's okay, honey. Through a pretty concerted effort, someone was able to a commentator was able to sort of leverage that term and run with it and saw that it had a lot of legs to kind of fuel the culture wars. And then it became a matter of policy in quite a number of states in a period of just 4 months. So that's a very successful propaganda effort in that it went from a concept that no one understood to state level policy in 4 months. That's pretty dramatic, right? That only can happen through direct to consumer communications sort of flow. It really is quite fascinating. You're welcome to engage. I'll share the URLs later, but you can check out this newsletter article. It was pretty interesting when you really drill down. Other things that people don't really understand, how the federal government really works. It's easy to kind of try to prove waste, fraud, and abuse, another kind of propagandized term that's being used now. If you dig and take spending out of context, because people don't really understand these are very complex entities. People don't really understand bias, all sorts of claims of bias flying around. Well, everybody has bias in their brains. What is it? Actually humans are biased by nature. Things like censorship. And then I've mentioned public health because I've started doing more work in the public health space. This notion of public health, we might need to make some sacrifices on behalf of somebody who might be more vulnerable to a health concern. Another concept that people don't understand very well, but has been in writ large, but has been somewhat leveraged to serve certain agendas. So what's the result of all this? We have threats to democracy that we know well. We had an election where we were preparing hard to keep our election safe and sound. The election was reasonably safe and sound, whether or not you liked the outcome. We have certain vulnerable groups that are either the subject of mis and disinformation campaigns, meaning falsehoods about them, or targeted with mis and disinformation campaigns, and with the goal of perhaps voter suppression or confusion of any kind. In the organizational development world, we refer to a culture of fear when people don't feel comfortable sharing their honest viewpoints or their authentic opinions because they're afraid of being attacked or discredited or trolled in social media. We call that a culture of fear, and it kind of seeds mistrust, and it's really exhausting to people. And then we have the research community who's trying to study these dynamics we're talking about, themselves going under attack. So this is an evolution of my former slide defining these terms, because I added propaganda, which is information that's designed to persuade, right? To serve a particular agenda, whether it's true, false, or in between, right? And you can see sort of on the facts to falsehoods continuum, it might be true, it might be false, but the goal is to persuade. Rumors are sort of in there as well, where they may not be. People spread rumors because they might be interesting. If they're true, that might be really, I want to be the one who share that, right? We're familiar with this term rumors. It's kind of not about as much whether it's true or false. It's just, really. And then the more technical terms that are newer on the scene is misdis and malinformation. Misinformation being falsehoods that are spread by people innocently. Oh, I saw this on social media. I hit share on Facebook. I didn't realize it was true or false. Maybe I didn't check, but I shared it for whatever reason, but I didn't intend to mislead anyone. Disinformation is when there is a stated or obvious intent to mislead, or you can kind of discern that intent to mislead, to cause confusion, to make money, etc. So there's malintent here. And you can see this is sort of my intent continuum on the left. And then malinformation is a reference to information that's fact-based, but people wrap a false story around it. So a good example is during the 2020 election, when we had these notions of suitcases of ballots being pulled out from under the table in Georgia at the State Farm Arena where they were counting ballots, and it became a whole big thing. And then the election workers themselves were targeted, and they had to sue. That whole fuss was a great example of malinformation, because the way it turned into a campaign, in a sense, was that certain people pulled the security footage from the State Farm Arena where the votes were being counted and wrapped a false story around it. Demonstrably to be false. It was debunked within days, but it didn't matter. People still told that story about suitcases of ballots being misappropriately counted. And that campaign, that sort of message set was presented to the state legislature in Georgia. It was used to try to coerce these election workers who were on the video to testify against their best interest. And then it actually went downhill in terms of being more damaging to those election workers from there. And they did win their suit in court. That's a great example of malinformation. The footage was real. It's just that people wrapped a false story around it. Okay, let me speed up a little bit here. This is a framework that we use to really tell and help people understand the elements that make up a disinformation campaign. We have manipulative actors, where there's a clear intent to disrupt either democratic processes or whatever else, manipulate the information ecosystem. We look at the kinds of behaviors they exhibit, the tactics and techniques they use. We look at what kinds of harmful content you may see shared. And then we look at how the distribution channels, how the information is distributed, how it diffuses and spreads. So an example, here's an actor. This is a guy who came clean after having created videos for Alex Jones's InfoWars network. Alex Jones, notorious for trying to seed the notion or the very harmful falsehood that the Sandy Hook shooting was a hoax. This is a guy that made videos for him, and this article in the New York Times will tell about how, and he kind of came clean on all of this and talked to the reporter, and he disclosed that the more sensational the video, the further it spread, the more engagement they got, the more money they made from any advertising or selling products. And so it didn't, he was like, forget whether it's true or false. I'm going to make them more sensational, the more extreme, because that's really what got the engagement on social media, which was the whole point. So that's called what we call feeding the algorithm. Another tactic that's being used is something that's called pink slime websites. So there is a media organization called Metric Media that has set up a bunch of these websites that look like local reporting, except they're really partisan content. So this actual screen grab is not, I pulled this, I did a talk at GW, so a lot of my examples here are health related, but there's another screen grab that I pulled that's maybe a better example that shows, for example, it was sort of commentary on Kamala Harris's campaign, somebody that worked for Kamala Harris's campaign and had done a drag show at one point. And that was the story. Oh, watch your kids, Kamala Harris's team is, engaged in drag show, whatever it is. And in other words, it's not local reporting about the community at all. It's partisan content. And in this case, this is sort of a health discrediting, a discount drug program that the federal government has maintains. And then the point is that the San Diego City Wire is not a local outlet that's serving San Diego. It's all sorts of other content. Sometimes the content is AI generated, but they look like a local outlet. So if you might stumble upon this, you might think, oh, that seems legitimate. It's serving my city. I'm a San Diego resident. But in reality, there's no local reporting at all. So we call those pink slime websites. Some other behaviors and tactics that folks use, if you think about a multimedia approach, you might write a book and create a documentary where you have a multimedia way to share a message that discredits that claims the pandemic was planned by the federal government and Dr. Fauci was behind it all, for example. The more that we have multimedia properties talking about that message, the more engagement and eyeballs you're going to get. So this graph on the left shows how the movie version, the pandemic movie, spread online as compared to other pop culture phenomena. For example, there was a situation, this is back in, I think it's right in 2020, there was some kind of like UFO type shit, type sighting, which is this phenomena here, the Pentagon aerial phenomena. There was a reunion of the Office cast in video that was shared on Facebook. And then there was a movie of Taylor Swift's City of Lover concert in Paris that also was spreading online. So you can see how pandemic's engagement online on Facebook eclipsed that of these other phenomena, even though you would think that Taylor Swift's City of Lover concert in Paris would get just as much or more views. Pandemic got more, and this is only look at the time frame. It's not even 2 weeks. This steep rise, it didn't even hit 2 weeks after the movie was first shared on Facebook. So these campaigns are very powerful, and the people behind them are extremely digitally savvy, far more digitally savvy than you or I. So just something to be aware of. Often information is shared without context, kind of like the malinformation example I shared. This is a little screen grab that tells the story of the FDA needing to put a warning sign on RSV vaccines. And while it's a perfectly reasonable, the FDA would put a warning label on there if there was even a few incidents of harm from the vaccine. But of course, those that want to sort of make a broader point to discredit vaccines are going to clip this piece of information out. This is not a piece of malinformation or misinformation. It's actually a correct the record type article. But the point is that when you've already got distrust of vaccines, something like that warning label is going to get clipped out and used to tell a story that's probably not accurate to what reality is, what the real story of the warning label. And we call that critical context missing. Here's my favorite example from last year. This is an article from VoteBeat working in concert with Spotlight PA, a great statewide outlet in Pennsylvania, that basically uncovered the person who was behind. You may have remembered this falsehood from the 2020 election, that there were more votes than voters in Pennsylvania. I don't know if you've heard that before. This is the person who basically did the faulty research that derived that message. And it was spread very, very widely within Pennsylvania and then otherwise. And then pretty soon, powerful people were using it again to sort of as a proof point that elections were stolen, when in fact, the research was faulty and it's not an accurate statement at all. There were not more votes than there were voters in Pennsylvania in 2020. And this article, which is a long one, tells exactly how that story came about. And it's really pretty interesting. So this is a lot of what I do, is sort of share how these falsehoods went down. Another important thing to understand is algorithms. Algorithms drive pretty much everything in society now, not just social media. Pretty much everything we do, when we do Google searches, anything we do online is driven by an algorithm, a coded, a set of codes that basically serves content to us based on data it already has about us or about other people. So algorithms are designed to show us content that matches our preferences and behaviors. And when we see content that matches our preferences, behaviors, we engage with it more. Oh, that's right, I love dancing. Oh, I'm going to like that dancing video because I love dancing. Well, that makes us, and if it sparks our emotions, even better. So when we engage, then the algorithms may boost the content so others see it. Well, Deanna liked that content. I'm going to show it to other former dancers, and they may like it as well. Then that engagement also drives advertising. Oh, Facebook or whomever, the advertisers that are advertising via Facebook. Look, Deanna liked it. We're going to serve her an ad related for buying dance shoes. Maybe she'll click on that. And then the information they have with my traffic online helps make their serving of advertisement that much more surgical and smarter. So hopefully this is a complex topic that I'm trying to break way down into a couple of minutes, but this is really important to understand. I actually think understanding algorithms should be a part of pretty much any class of any kind today, because it really drives so much. Okay, so that's all good. All these actors that's what they're doing. But what about us as information consumers? What happens when we interact with content or see content that may or may not be true? Our brains make assumptions, and I'll explain these. Our emotions intervene, very important. We may disconnect from quality sources as a result, getting into that news avoidance or cynicism. And it even can make us connect from one another. And I'll talk about that too. So one thing that happens, and this draws on research from a researcher named Sander van der Linden in Cambridge, who you may have stumbled across. He's if you Google his name, you'll see a lot of reporting, podcasts, et cetera. It's really good stuff. Who shares, this is just a snippet of his work, but some good concepts here. Truth bias means we just default to thinking things are true when we read them or see them. That's just sort of way we grew up. We're not going to automatically assume the content is false. We're going to default to thinking it's true. Then illusory truth says, well, the more we hear something, the more likely we'll think it's true. Not just the more we'll remember it, which is how comms people like me, we know that, right? We share the same message with you over and over, like the Obamacare messages. You'll be more likely to remember it. But this research says you'll also be more apt to think it's true because you've just seen it a lot of times. So if you see pandemic on Facebook and you see it, your friend mentions that they just read the book, and then you happen to be on Twitter and you see some text about that, and then you see, I don't know, a commercial for it on Amazon or whatever, an ad on Amazon, you're going to probably build some trust around that property. And you're certainly not going to assume that since you've seen it all those times, that must be a legitimate thing. Or if it's a simple message, it must be true. And then confirmation bias is a little bit better understood, I think, among people. And that's that we're going to believe information that backs up what we already believe or suspect. We may even seek that information out proactively. Oh, that validates what I knew it. And then you may go Googling and try to find other information. Before long, you've created a rabbit hole through your own search habits that's going to show you more and more information. Now, if that information is false or it's negative toward a group or whatever it is, you may adopt that perspective. Confirmation bias. The emotional pathways here are important to understand. This is a former partner of mine, Laurel Edelson. She's at Northeastern now, but was at NYU. She's still with an organization called Cybersecurity for Democracy at NYU. But what she shares here in Scientific American is important to understand. The most successful misinformation succeeds by appealing to emotions rather than reason. If misinformation can tap that emotive pathway, you're not going to question it because it feels good. Now, where does that emotional response come from? Our identities as people. I'm a churchgoer, for example, and I see information related to religious groups or my personal religious group. That may spark emotion because I identify as a churchgoer. And then you can take it into any demographic marker. Me as a woman business owner, all of these aspects of our identities seed these emotional responses. And the way that we engage with content is very much informed by those emotional responses. Those emotional responses are all kind of tied up in it. And this is what I call the misinformation polarization cycle, whereby if you see misinformation about or related to a particular group, again, due to confirmation bias, it may validate something that you already understand, et cetera. Suddenly you're in a rabbit hole. This creates in-group, out-group thinking, right? Like, oh, that group over there, we start to think, we've heard this term othering. We may think certain things about that group. And then we may also be in kind of an information rabbit hole with more and more information that kind of seeds and reinforces that perspective. And suddenly we've divided ourselves because of this misinformation that's coursing through the information ecosystem that we happen to engage in. So the misinformation polarization cycle. So I would love to pause for question, but I want to get through these tips real quick. And then I will stop talking and let you all ask questions and comment, because I'd love your personal experiences with these things. Okay, I'll just let you scan these for just a minute. And then I'll explain each one. And don't worry if you didn't get through them all. I'm going to cover each of them. So what's the good news about news? So the media, I've gotten to the point where people being very cynical about the news media, canceling their Washington Post subscriptions, for example, triggers my emotions because I'm that worried about our information ecosystem and people getting their news through social media, which is a channel, not a news source. That means that your friends and family are basically telling you to believe. We need fact-based quality reporting. So why? Because quality reporting is standards-based. And a good media outlet will share what those standards of reporting are and make it very transparent. And the quality media ecosystem is related to, because sometimes they hire professional fact checkers that are IFCN certified, but that's where professional fact checking lives as well. And we want professional fact checkers. You and I are not equipped to do professional fact checking. So we're not going to give up on fact checking either. We have new business models for media. There's, everybody recognizes that the media sector is having rough times right now, and there's big new funding efforts from Press Forward, for example, that's designed to really restore the local news ecosystem and make sure communities have the sources of reporting they need. Local news, the reason we talk about local news a lot in the media sector is because local news, not just the communities need it, but it's also more trusted by communities versus national sources. And it's also less polarizing. People find it less off-putting, less biased, etc. Local news is sort of, in my view, a protective factor against the spread of mis and disinformation. So, we here in the DC area, if you all are local, are blessed to have a fair amount of options, including the 51st, which I mentioned earlier, is a new outlet that kind of grew out of the DCist that was owned by WAMU and then itself went under. So this is something to watch. They're small and trying to get their financial footing, but they're also tied into some of these new business models where people are reimagining and figuring out how to make reporting sustainable. This is a broader kind of, you can see my health, again, this is from my GW presentation, but you can see other kind of new nonprofit outlets. Spotlight PA I mentioned, there's the city in New York City, Baltimore Banner. Baltimore is now a two-paper town again because Baltimore Banner grew out of the kind of when the Baltimore Sun was bought and Baltimore Banner grew up, and now they have Baltimore residents have many more sources of reporting than they did before, or at least one additional very high quality source. Virginia Mercury is the state's newsroom network that serves the state of Virginia, etc. All nonprofits. So here's the evidence-based way that we notice our emotional reactions to content. So when we see a post on Facebook or a tweet or whatever, and it sparks frustration or anger, or you may be experiencing fury these days, you may be experiencing sorrow. If you just simply notice that emotional reaction, you're going to be that much less likely to share a piece of information or a message that is not true. And you're going to be that much more apt to perhaps take a moment and check the source. So noticing disrupting that emotive pathway is super critical. The term for this is called IREX, where this came from, and it's evidence-based. The primary source I forget, but the technique is simply pause and say, that makes me angry. And then you have that moment where you're not going to be sort of doing that knee-jerk share, which you may or may not do already, but all of us have done it once. And what you want to do is just notice when your emotions are involved with how you consume information. As mentioned, we're not going to give up fact checking. This is a guy named Ethan Porter from GW, who's an expert on fact checking, who will say we need a portfolio of approaches to stem the spread of mis and disinformation, and one is professional fact checking. And here's a study that showed that fact checks legitimately reduced belief in misinformation on a variety of continents, and that can be extrapolated to us here in the US. And often reducing that belief was durable and lasted over time. He's got a lot more research if you want to check him out. He's a really nice guy too. I did a conference at the public library in DC, at DC Public Library, MLK branch last October, and he came and spoke. It was great. Here's my list of fact-checking resources, although NewsGuard isn't on here, but I already mentioned them. Factcheck.org out of the Annenberg Institute at Penn. PolitiFact by Poynter. Agence France Presse goes by AFP these days. FactCheck, great fact-checking in multiple languages, if that's of interest to you. FactCheckado, in particular in Spanish, for Spanish speakers. Snopes has been around for a long time. So these are media outlets in and of themselves now. And just because Zuckerberg has decided that he doesn't want Facebook to engage with these resources doesn't mean that you and I cannot. You can also use your search skills, kind of hone your search skills so you find these fact checks if you want to verify something. So for example, let's say you've heard, this rumor that COVID mRNA vaccines are being added to the food supply. Well, how are you going to check that? If you add the words fact check to your Google search, you're going to be that much more apt to turn up a legit fact checked article about it, rather than you might, who knows what else you might turn up, right? So if you can simply ask Google the question and tack fact check onto the end, then you're much more apt to find an article like this one from Associated Press fact checking bureau that debunks it. No, COVID vaccines are not in the food supply. Okay. This is, oh, and like I predicted, I forgot to turn on sound. But basically, this is a technique. This is a TikTok video where she shares a technique where if you see an article, like you see that San Diego City News, whatever, what was it? San Diego News, whatever that outlet name was. And you see that source and you see an article that looks sketchy and the source looks sketchy. She's encouraging you to open up another browser window and vet the source before you read the article, lateral reading. So rather than going deep on the article where you might be influenced by the content, maybe it's true, maybe it's false, open up another browser. See, she's doing it with a search with an outlet called News Punch. And rather than reading the article, she's going to open up another browser and Google News Punch. And she will find, she's able to find actually some sources that say, some legitimate sources that say, that's a hyper-partisan, look at misinformation directory from factcheck.org. There's an article about News Punch. Factcheck.org has covered News Punch. And here's a Wikipedia article saying it's hyper partisan. I forget what that says, but it's basically saying the content is not reliable on this website. So simple way to vet our sources today. And it's more and more important because there's more and more newsletters every single day, and nobody can keep track of them all. Being a news curator, checking time. Okay, I'm going to wrap up. Being a news curator, super important. Here's what using the Google News Initiative app is a great way to diversify your sources. This is what today's, I brought it up just before this call. This is what today's, my briefing looks like for today. So there's this breaking news story about a helicopter crash in the Hudson River, New York with 5 dead. You can see already it's showing me a variety of sources on this story. ABC 7 New York, ABC News National, the BBC. Then you can see this full coverage button. All you have to do is hit that, and you'll see quite a variety. You'll see a much broader range of reporting on this particular story. Super easy, and it's a great way because if we're really going to be solid and good news consumers, we want to check a variety of sources for whatever story that we're trying to learn about. And the Google News Initiative, Google News app is a great way to do that. It's free. Download it. You can turn on notifications if you want. You can follow reporters on social media, whatever social media you're on. They tend to be there. Now, here's Lauren Weber, who I mentioned earlier. She's on X and Blue Sky, and I recognize the vast majority, perhaps none of you, are on X or Blue Sky, which is fine. That's her choice. But another reporter you might find on Instagram. Many of them are on LinkedIn now, or they weren't before. And you can follow them there. And then if you engage in their content, like you say, oh, great article, thank you so much, or you like it, then the algorithm will say, oh, Lynn likes that. So I'm going to serve more content from that reporter. It's not a perfect, equation here. It's much more complicated, but the more you engage, the more you follow legitimate news outlets on social media and engage with their content, the more apt you are to see the content. And you should be intentional and train the algorithm. That's kind of where we want to get to here. And then conversing across new viewpoint difference is hard, and it's really important. No social change ever happens in a bubble. So the more you can have respectful conversations with people in your worlds that are different from you, that have different viewpoints, the more we're going to move forward as a society. And I like to share certain tips about things that we can say. If you're in a conversation, try not interrupting the person. That's kind of step one. Using your listening skills. Tell me more about that. I hear you as a rejoinder when someone says almost anything is a way to acknowledge and respect what they've just said. We're kind of losing sight on some of these things because we're in a very polarized, anxious time right now. But these are little tips that you can use. So what you're saying is repeat it back, reflective listening. You can gently question people's sources. That's so interesting. I've never seen that before. Where did you get that? I'd love to know. You're not going to say, that's ridiculous, right? That gets you nowhere. There's ways, but sometimes we have to practice these little responses to have them at the ready. Because again, we may have an emotional reaction when somebody says something. And we have to, with more practice, you can pull these up a lot more readily. Okay. I'm going to stop, skip over to pre-debunking. Let me get to the end here. There we go. I want to pause and hear what you all have to say and what questions you may have. And I'm going to just land on this slide because I've launched a speaker series, Truth in Common has, and the talks are free. And this is one coming up on April 24th. This is the woman who co-founded an organization called Living Room Conversations, which basically has downloadable conversation guides that you can have a conversation about any number of issues with your friends or neighbors in your own living room, in your community center, at your library, through your organization. And it kind of guides you in having a respectful but meaningful conversation, and not one that dials up and people get emotional or upset. And it's a very simple model that is one of the most commonly cited in this world of bridging polarized communities, bridging divides. And so she's speaking with the group about, basically, we'll expand on the conversation tips that I just mentioned and talk about her work convening conversations all over the country. She's also the person who founded Moms Rising and MoveOn.org. So she's kind of a big name in progressive spaces, if that's your thing. So you're welcome to join, and I'm going to truly be quiet now, and I will put the link to her talk in the chat. Okay. What do you all have? I would love to hear your reactions, questions, etc.
Oh my goodness. Wow. It's so much fabulous information. So I thank you. I do see, Tony, I saw your hand first, so I'm going to ask you to unmute and share your question or thoughts. And just for everybody to note, I did put the name of the book that Deanna mentioned in the chat. It's called The Siren's Call. So that is Nicholas Hayes' book that you were looking for the title of.
Beautiful.
Tony.
Okay. Sorry, I came in a little bit late. This was fascinating, but also terrifying, especially for some of us. And there are some of us who do nothing but read the New York Times. So we feel and watch the, PBS News, and somehow feel that we know the truth and we don't worry about all the misinformation. But it makes me wonder that all the misinformation must be a whole lot cheaper to get. For one thing, the New York Times is expensive for people, and a lot more fun for those people who like to sit and look at their phones all day long. Anyway, that's my comment. It isn't really a question unless I'm somehow missing out by not receiving all this misinformation. I have Facebook, but I don't engage in it very much. That's what I have to say.
Thank you, Tony. If you've got things curated so that you're seeing just fact-based content, the New York Times, there's plenty of people that think the New York Times is an excellent, credible source. I mean, it's really the most moneyed source among the print outlets right now, with the highest readership. The Daily is the most listened to podcast, higher than Joe Rogan, by the way. I just heard that at the conference I attended. I know. So that's all good. If you've curated so it's not there, then great. What I would encourage you is to be a resource for others. Maybe you can really use your gift articles that you get on the New York Times. I would bet money I don't use them enough either. But if you want to share articles with folks, you have 10 gift articles a month if you're a subscriber. That's something, and you can, maybe it's a topic that you hear in conversation and you want to share a resource for folks. We can be resources. As well-read people in the DC area, we can be resources for others.
Okay,
I appreciate that. Yeah.
Thank you. Other questions or comments for Deanna? If you have something and you want to unmute, feel free. I'm not seeing any electronic hands up. So I, for one, was fascinated with all the different sources out there. I'm familiar with Blue Sky. There were a few you mentioned I didn't know. But I was most intrigued by that Google News. I didn't realize that they give you other sources and stuff. That's fabulous. As you know, one who tends to be a bit of a news junkie, and I do, listen to BBC News and try and get like a broader view than just our own United States tunnel vision, if you will. It's just great to know that that's out there and that they kind of let you know what other resources there are.
Yeah,
Um,
it's a really great resource, and it's going to be a little bit informed by your previous search history. So someday I'll do a study where
Whoops, Deanna, I think you're frozen. Is anybody else finding her frozen?
yes, she
Yes.
goes.
Okay, so it's not just my computer here.
Mhm.
Ooh, that is not good.
Somebody must be getting to her.
No. Wow, that's deep. That's dark, Tony. Um, hopefully she will unfreeze shortly, because she knows a lot more than I do about this. Let's see, there's one new message. So what, Judith, I see you met. Oh, okay. So Deanna is logged off. She'll probably log back in a second, and then she can finish her comment and I can ask Judith's question. So here she is. She is joining. There you go. Deanna, are you back? You're muted. So I'm glad you came right back in. We were missing you.
oh my gosh, that was so weird. I don't know if I don't know what just happened. I like my big screen. I have two monitors here. My big screen suddenly had like a million little pink triangles, as if the light tube was blowing or something.
Oh,
Oh
And
my.
it shut down, and then my laptop shut down because that's my other screen, and now it's just turned all back on. So I
Well,
don't
I'm
know what
glad you
to
came back on.
say.
Thank you.
That was crazy. I've never seen that before. I thought, oh my gosh, I thought maybe the monitor just like kicked the bucket in that very moment. Okay,
So
so I'll
while
get
you were
back on
gone,
the other line too. Go ahead.
thank you. So while you were gone, this Judith had this question in the chat. It says, "Do you consider Washington Post a local journal?" And so
Great.
she feels like she does, and is that okay? And do you consider Washington Post a local journal?
Well, it always was, wasn't it? Um, I've lived in Washington for almost 30 years, and it's always been our local newspaper. Unfortunately, you know, the local news team has been shrunk. And even more recently, you may have seen in the press that Jeff Bezos has changed the editorial, the sort of thrust of the editorial board and the opinion section
right.
to focus only on free market issues, free speech, this kind of thing. It feels like it has a partisan influence. So that's another piece that, gee, does that reflect the Washington, D.C. zeitgeist? I don't know if I would agree with that. So with that said, we have to have this is Washington, D.C. We have to have we have to have as
Right.
many local outlets as possible. We are a vital place with both national and local things going on. So there's not very many many markets that I can think of that need local level reporting as much as we do. Because, for example, if we lose home rule I'm a Washington D.C. resident. If we lose home rule, for example, we got to keep track with what's going on there. So when I understand some people have canceled their subscriptions and have felt unhappy with what Bezos is doing. But in my view, in the end of the day, that just hurts the local reporters that are staying there, like my neighbor, Paul Schwartzman, who is soldiering on and has not quit. He's still reporting on local issues. He lives right across the alley from me. I'm in Adams Morgan. So we want to keep supporting them, and we want to keep a local outlet vibrant, because NPR and our local WAMU outlet and Washington Post is kind of what we have. So I encourage, so it's less of a local outlet as it used to be, let's say, but it's still in terms of print, the best we've got. And then the 51st is growing up, but they're pretty new.
Tell
Good
tell
point.
us about
Yes.
the 51st. What's the 51st?
Oh, great question. So, so there was a couple of staff who were on staff at DCist, which was the newsletter that WAMU took over. And then it went out of business. WAMU decided that it wasn't making money, and so they canceled it. So there was a couple of workers that kind of grew the 51st out of the ashes, so to speak. And the 51st is a newsletter. So it's digital only, there's no print version, but it's also worker led. So these people were not happy with how the DCS situation went down, and so they just decided to basically set up a cooperative outlet that is worker owned and led. So Teresa Frontado is one of the key players there. Eric Falquero, both of them have spoken at my groups. And so you should just check it out online. Just know that it's not going to be like daily breaking news reporting, because it's costly, right? So they don't quite have the staff yet, but they were able to raise over like $250,000 or something in their first year, which is pretty good. So that's the 51st, and obviously a reference to we would like to be a state.
Very interesting. Are there any other questions? We've already taken 5 minutes more than I promised we would. So are there any other questions before I thank Deanna for a fabulous job? Tony, do you have another question?
Yeah, I have another question.
Sure.
If I want to hear what it is the people that are voting the other way are hearing, what would be the simplest way to get it without linking all my social media to them? I mean,
Mhm.
Fox News.
Right.
Fox News perhaps, but I never know when to turn them on. They always seem to be doing something stupid that's not worth watching.
So there's
I'll
certainly
keep
tuning
quiet.
into Fox. There's tuning. No, it's a great suggestion. You can tune into Fox. There's also an outlet that, write this one down, Ground News
Mm-hmm.
I think it's .com. So Ground News is a really interesting platform that, let's take that helicopter. I'm sorry, I'm only on my phone, but at this,
You're
I'm
fine.
probably just staying on the phone. So Ground News will show you that helicopter story, and they'll also reference how it's being covered by a variety of outlets, meaning outlets that you could say span the political spectrum. Now, categorizing outlets according to right or left, bias, whatever, is a fraught kind of thing. It's kind of dicey, and
Mm-hmm.
it suggests bias that may not be there. But still, you can generally say that some outlets lean right and some outlets lean left. So Ground News will take a story and show you, okay, the left is covering this like crazy and the right isn't at all. And then you can click on the various stories that make up that continuum. So check out Ground News. It's really interesting. And there's another outlet that's similar. We'll show you a range of, let's say politically aligned reporting, and it's called The Flip Side. It's out of Pittsburgh, as I recall. So that's another website that you can follow. And I know you probably don't want like 8 million newsletters in your inbox, but
No.
you can check these out and just engage with ones that you find interesting. But Ground News is one. You know what's interesting about Ground News too is I downloaded the app, and whenever you look at things like the Associated Press app, I always recommend to everybody. If you just want one news source, I mean, there's New York, but you can, Associated Press is basically our syndicated kind of baseline fact-based reporting in the world, not just US. But the Ground News has an app, and sometimes I've seen breaking news alerts from Ground News sooner than I've seen it directly from outlets themselves. So check that out.
No. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments for Deanna before we let her go enjoy her evening? Well,
Thank you.
thank
That's
you.
what I want to say.
Thank you very much. This was really informative and very helpful. And I really appreciate just giving the time to Georgetown Village, our members and our volunteers. So thank you.
You're welcome. Anytime. And do visit my website, truthandcommon.org.
Oh,
And if you're
okay.
part of a community organization and you want to have, you could bring us in to do our signature 3 workshop series. It's basically kind of you've seen a condensed version of it, but I have a local reporter come and talk to the group in the second session, and I dig into the ecosystem and share more examples and all that. So if you are affiliated with anywhere that wants to do a workshop or a talk like this, just let me know. I'm happy to do it. Again, we're a nonprofit.
And
And
Deanna, I
yeah.
just, speaking about journalists, I just want to invite you. Next week, we have Rita Brava coming.
Oh, nice.
So if you would be more than welcome to join us. It's part of
Oh, I'd love to.
our signature Bill Plan Conversation series. Bill was a member of our board and a founding member of Georgetown Village. And Robin, his widow, has endowed this series in his memory.
Oh,
And
lovely. That's wonderful.
yes, and so she will be here Tuesday, the 15th, and I will email you all the information.
Fabulous. That's great. I will definitely try to jump on. Well, for anybody who
It's
has seen,
actually in person. It's in person. Come
oh, it
join us.
is. Oh,
Oh,
nice.
yes.
With
Oh, I love
food.
that.
With food. There's
Okay.
wine, there's
I
food,
mean, there's wine. Okay, I'm there for sure. The in-person stuff really matters. Our workshops are usually in person, and it really people just like to connect now. You know, there's kind of lower level anxiety in everything we do right now. So whenever we can connect in person.
Absolutely. Well, I will email you the information. I do hope you'll join us. And again, I thank you very much for your time.
Sure thing. You're welcome. And thanks for your great questions, and just nice to see your faces today. And yeah, hopefully we meet again.
All
Have a
right.
good evening.
Good.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Take care.